Jim Hansen published this piece, and it was originally published. Actually, it doesn't say. So it's on the blog over at HuffPost Green. What you need to know about the irreparable harm of climate change, and the interesting, I think, perhaps most important part of this, he's publishing a paper in the journal Atmospheric Chemistry and Physics, and the title of the paper is "Ice Melt, Sea Level Rise, and Superstorms." And the superstorms is what raised my eyebrows. I mean, we've all heard about how, as the ice melts, it's going to raise the sea level. And it takes a lot more calories of heat to melt ice into water and only increase it 1 degree than it does to take water and increase it by 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 degrees. In other words, as the ice goes away, the water starts warming up really, really, really faster. But the thing that he's focusing on in this case is that as ice is melting off Greenland, that fresh water pouring off that continent and the ice melting in the Arctic, which is fresh water, even though it's on a salty sea, as fresh water, invades the Atlantic, the North Atlantic, it threatens to shut down what's referred to as the Great Conveyor Belt. Actually, oddly enough, my most recent book, the latest book that just came out, is called ADHD and the Edison Gene, A Drug-Free Approach to Managing the Unique Qualities of Your Child. And I've got a whole chapter in here about the Great Conveyor Belt and how it might be, that some ADD kid is going to help us figure out how to solve this problem. But it's probably the best chapter. I should probably pull it out and see if we can publish it as an article someplace. It describes all this, but what this is it starts with these warm ocean currents about halfway between Hawaii and South China in the Pacific, and the water warms, and as surface water, then it travels west and then south around the southern tip of South Africa, and then across the Atlantic off to basically the Gulf of Mexico. We call it the Gulf Stream at that point. And then it goes up the U.S. East Coast, and then it goes back out into the ocean. And somewhere about 300-400 miles south of Greenland and a couple of 100 miles west of England, it hits a point where the water has gotten so cold that this water becomes denser and more saline, and it settles to the bottom of the ocean, and it follows that same path all the way back to the Pacific. As it's a continuous flowing river, almost like a Mobius strip. It's just continuously flowing this loop, and they call it there's actually a scientific phrase for it. It's called the North Atlantic Deep Water Formation and Antarctic Bottom Water Formation. There's two of them. One in the northern hemisphere, more or less, although it goes all the way down south of Africa, and the other in the Antarctic. And he says, if this thing shuts down because of meltwater interfering with the ability of it's both temperature and salinity that makes this happen, then very strange things are going to happen. And let me just read to you a little bit from James Hansen's piece over at Huffington Post today. He says, first of all, these feedbacks where he's talking about, as you melt the ice in the Arctic, it becomes water. Water heats up faster. It's darker. You lose the albedo effect, the reflectivity, but also water itself heats up faster than or takes fewer calories to heat up than ice does, et cetera. He says, these feedbacks raise questions about how soon we will pass points of no return, in which we lock in consequences that cannot be reversed on any time scale that people care about. He says, this could mean the loss of all of our coastal cities. A more immediate threat, though, and this is where when I read this, I was like, whoa. Remember the mile-wide tornado that came across the central United States last summer? Remember Superstorm Sandy? Remember the super typhoon that hit the U.S. media almost didn't, paid very little coverage to this, but the largest typhoon in history hit the southern China Sea last year? He says, a more immediate threat is the likelihood of shutting down the ocean's overturning circulations in the North Atlantic and Southern Oceans. That's where superstorms come in. He says, Greenland and Antarctica are beginning to melt because of global warming. This fresh meltwater spilling out into the North Atlantic and into the Southern Ocean already is having important effects. We conclude that light fresh water added to upper layers of the ocean is already beginning to shut down the North Atlantic Deep Water Formation and the Antarctic Bottom Water Formation. This will have enormous consequences in future decades. We're not talking centuries here anymore, decades, if full shutdown is allowed to occur. He says such a situation occurred in the last interglacial period 118,000 years ago. The tropics were about 1 degree Celsius warmer than today. And ocean core data show that deep water formation shut down. The North Atlantic cooled, and there is evidence of powerful superstorms at about that time, powerful enough for giant waves to toss 1,000-ton mega boulders onto the shore in the Bahamas. Just let that settle in there for a second. 1,000-ton mega boulders. He said some scientists think these boulders may have been tossed up by a tsunami, but we present multiple lines of evidence that the boulders and other geologic features are best explained as the result of superstorms. If we let ice melt from Greenland become large enough to fully shut down the AMOC, the Atlantic Overturning Circulation, it will be permanent as far as the public is concerned because it takes several centuries for this to get moving again. Superstorms? You ready for 300-mile-an-hour winds? I mean, we don't have buildings that can stand up to that, much less anything else. This is like serious, serious stuff.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.